Alright, this is not a Microsoft PowerPoint class. However, what we're going to be doing with the mouse in this class is based on the fact that all of you, or most of you, will be taking Microsoft Office, and that program, along with lots of other programs, are trying to go to this user interface that's very heavily dependent on selection sets using the mouse. Okay, so first we're going to talk about what a selection set is. In Autocad, you might have lines, you might have arcs, you might have polylines, you might have texts, you might have all kinds of different things. And you might be dealing with just one of them. If you are going to be dealing with a set of them, you wanted to change all their colors, or you wanted to move them all or rotate them all, you would build something called a selection set. This concept of a selection set acting on more than one thing is actually related to relational databases where you're, for instance, trying to select everything that's red, or every person that lives in Ohio whose name is John Glenn, something like that. If you don't know who John Glenn is from Ohio, look it up. Okay, so that same concept goes forward here in most other programs. So we're just going to, I'm introducing you to this just so you can realize why we are making this shift and pushing you to do things a certain way with selection sets in the mouse, where you grab things first and then act on them. So I'm going to go here, and I'm using a left click, and then I'm going to go right click, and you notice something comes up. I can cut or erase. I'm going to cut. I'm left clicking, right clicking, and it doesn't let me do anything. It wants to paste that back. I'm going to left click, right click, cut. So I'm going to kind of, that sense of I'm getting a clear pad, if you would, here. And don't necessarily pay attention to what I'm doing, but I want you to realize that this concept of the ribbon going across the top of the page is something that startled many people when they came out, but as it gets, this is not an arbitrary thing when you shift an interface, a graphic unit interface, user interface this much. So we'll see whether everyone else gets on board. AutoCAD, in fact, has. What you'll see is these things are functionally grouped, and so it may take a while if you're used to it, but you kind of have to click around, and what you have is, for every major menu, every major ribbon, you have a set of sub-menus or sub commands. So in this case, I'm going to just try to insert some things so we can get used to how we select in this Microsoft program. I'm going to bring in some Clipart. Everyone loves Clipart, I'm sure. I'm not really sure how to find Clipart, but I'm going to organize my Clipart, and I'm going to go out to, I don't know, Office Collections, and I'm just going to bring in some buildings here. And I'm sorry if you can't see it on the screen, but I'm going to need a little more space here. I'm going to bring in some buildings, and I'm dragging left click and dropping. I'm just kind of doing a drag and drop here. Bring in another building, and bring in another building. And obviously these are all schematics. There's a pretty lighthouse like we have up in Door County or in Bayfield. Alright, now what you noticed here is I've brought those things there, and they're all highlighted for some reason. Well, that's fine. I can now, if I left click here, I more or less clear the selection set, so there's nothing selected. Well, how you typically add to a selection set, you can either add individually, so grab 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things, or add in groups. And this process of adding or subtracting from a selection set is going to be really important. So for instance, I noticed there that my lighthouse is in the wrong spot. So I'm going to left click, and now you notice it's kind of allowing me to it's giving me a visual clue there that I might want to move that. Alright, so now I left clicked out in the open space. I've got all these things together. I want to maybe move 2 of them to the right. So I click on one, click on the other, and you notice that what it's doing based on a setting, it is changing the selection set. Right now the selection set is the lighthouse. Right now the selection set is the buildings. If I want them both to be the selection set, I hold the shift key. And now you notice there are 2 things in the selection set. And so this being Microsoft, you'll notice if I go over one of those, I can just left click and move things left and right. But more what I want you to get used to in terms of the commonality of interface is when you've gone over these, selected these things, you right click over one of them. Sorry, I'm going to click left click, hold a shift key, right click out here in the space, and just realize that something's going to occur. It's not always going to be the same from program to program. I click, I'm holding the shift key down, I'm holding a right click now, and here you see these kind of options that you could do here, cut, paste, whatever. I can again add by holding the shift key. I can subtract then by holding the control key. The control key is kind of a toggle, so you're going to learn to play around with the left mouse button and the shift key and the control key to deal with individual shapes. So in this case, I'll grab 3 of them. I'm staying over the top of the entity or the object, if you would. I'm hitting a right click, and I'm just going to group them, right? Or I'll just go ahead and group. They don't give me many choices here. So now if you notice that each of these things now is working as this thing is acting as a whole group. They're all kind of bound together. If I want to ungroup them, I hit a right click and ungroup. Okay, so we'll talk about the AutoCAD analogy to grouping and not grouping. What I want to expose you to is purely the selection set here. By using your left click button on your mouse and then the shift and the control key, you can build up a selection set. I also finally want to introduce you to the commonality to what's called a window, which is essentially by clicking with your left mouse button, keeping it held down and pulling across, you grab what is called a selection window. If you go left to right, you get it in the blue color, and if you go right to left, you don't get a different color, but you'll see they act differently. In AutoCAD, you'll see that as you go right to left or left to right, it actually gives you a different color. So let me show you how that works. I'm holding my left key down, I'm selecting left mouse key, I'm going across, and you notice even though I'm touching this, it's not selected. If you go left to right, it's something called a window. It's only going to grab things that are completely inside. Same as before, if I start a new selection without hitting the shift or the control key, I lose my original selection. So if I want to add 2 things together, I just hold my shift key down as I'm doing the next selection. And I notice there, again, remembering if I'm going right to left and I come across something, it does not select it. I'm going to hit the escape key here. If you go right to left, in AutoCAD, though it appear not in this program, if you go right to left in AutoCAD, it's going to do a crossing. So in this case, we don't have that ability, that you have to more or less grab things. So going all the way across, grabbed everything, holding my left mouse key across, I've selected everything. If I want to unselect them, I hold the shift key and either click on one or click across it. Now I have those things. Again, you notice the mouse is going to act differently depending on where it is. If it is out in the white space, it acts one way. If it's over one of the entities, it acts another. You can either just left click and move these things, or in terms of right clicking and doing something like make them a group again. Now, you will notice that I am going to be shying away from some things in AutoCAD that act like windows. Many things we're going to have you actually do that, but because of the fact that when we're dealing in AutoCAD in the design space or the model space, it's really supposed to be an exact thing. So this arbitrary cutting and pasting of 4 different types of sketches or buildings is not something we want to start at. When we get to schematics, it's something we will do, but for now, let's just review. In Windows, you use a left click to grab things, and then once they grab, you right click and it gives you a particular potential chance to change what was there. So if you're using a left click with the shift key, left click, shift key on and off, or control key, or using a window right to left or left to right. So that's going to build something called selection sets. We'll look at how it works in AutoCAD, and that's really just giving you some kind of basis to learning one set of rules. Thanks for listening.